people in the medical field are wondering, here's the question: what constitutes a male? Is it the Y chromosome, or is it his plumbing? I'm sorry, in Los Angeles, what is the Medical Association said that 1 in 20,000 men on this planet have no Y chromosome. In this day and age, 1 in 20,000 men have no Y chromosome. They are X chromosome based. So now, they don't have a Y chromosome. Does that mean they're female? Well, they got the right plumbing. So is the plumbing the identifying feature of what constitutes a male? If that's true, then any woman who takes and undergoes surgery and has an operation and now has the plumbing, by definition, then because she has the plumbing, then they're male. What identifies a male? The Y chromosome or the plumbing? And doctors, especially male doctors, are having a lot of problem with this, and that's a question that, hopefully your listeners will entertain. What is it? A Y chromosome, and there are men who don't have it today, or the plumbing, and there are women who do have the plumbing. Okay, now, probably what got me in the most trouble about 2 years ago when I first started coming out, the female egg. The female egg is 14,500 times larger than the sperm. Okay? 14,500 times larger than the sperm. So let's think about this. When a male sperm and a female egg join together, how big a part does the sperm contribute? 1 part in 14,500. 1 part. Female genes in the human egg, female genes in the contribution to life vary from between 250 to 100, depending on the study that you read, 250 female genes for every 1 male gene that every embryo has. 250 to 1 male gene, 14,500 larger. All embryos begin as a female. That's why men have nipples. There is no other reason. They are not erogenous zones. I'm sorry, that's a mistake. Men have nipples because all human embryos began as females. All of a sudden, for whatever reason, there is a testosterone bath, and this embryo, which was destined to become female, is suddenly altered chemically to become a male. Therefore, here's where I got in the most trouble and continue to disturb people. I will argue that every single male on this planet is an altered female. Were it not for testosterone, you would have been a female. All males on this planet, all human males, are altered females.
You know, Robert, you shared that piece of information before on this show.
Exactly.
And I'm going to tell you, it raises some eyebrows out there, and I love it.
I tell you, people, I mean, that is maybe the hardest thing. Now, I am not saying that all of a sudden all men are sissies or effeminate. That's not the case. The case is that life on this planet began with an X chromosome. It was female-based, whether it came in by accident or there really is intelligent design. So, what has happened is supports that I'm saying for thousands and thousands of years, Venus figurines, and there are all kinds of caves with archaeological, the cave drawings and inscribed walls, that they were all female. I'm sorry?
Yeah, and Robert, before you go on with the Egypt thing, I want to tell you something that I went to Egypt in 2012 and visited some of the museums in there, right? And one of the things that I noticed was on these very tall statues that was in this one room in the Cairo Museum, all of the Egyptian, they were supposedly male, right? Male statues. And they all had a breastplate on, and they all had, you know, that kind of like skirt thing that they wore, right, with the panels. But as I was looking at the shape of these statues, Robert, they were almost feminine in their shape. They had their waistline is where a female's waistline would be, and their had just like slight hips. And I don't mean they were curvy, but when they wore the breastplate, and then you've seen this kind of indentation where the hip would be, not where the waistline would be, not where a man's would be. I kept looking at them. I kept telling the people that I was with, I said, you know, these really look like females. They look like females to me, and there would be no way for you to tell because you couldn't see the top at all because the breastplate was covering it, so you couldn't tell whether they were actually male or female. But they were sculpted in a more feminine aspect to me by the shape than they would have been a male that we normally associate.
I absolutely agree. There are some figurines and statues that are absolutely feminine in their appearance, though they are supposed to represent a masculine, either a pharaoh or a deity. There was a concerted effort somewhere around 2000 BC to make males the dominant figure in their cosmology. This is where Osiris became, for example, linked to Orion. And there were other changes where there was actually a determined effort to make males the dominant force in humankind. In fact, some of the pictures of the queens would show them with an artificial beard or some sort of male appearance. But the earliest representations clearly favored the female form over the masculine form. One of the things that you know, I was very fortunate. I danced on the top of the Great Pyramid in 1999. Things have been shut down. There's been all kinds of changes. And as I continued with the few sources I had to try to discover more about the ancient, the hieroglyphs and the writings, we found that there were several of the walls, for example, you know, in the Valley of Kings, inside their tombs, the walls had been scraped clean. And this was not something that occurred, you know, 1,000 years ago. The walls were scraped clean more than likely in the last couple of hundred years. Again, why is this being destroyed? Why are things happening? Unfortunately, Egypt has gone through such a tremendous upheaval that a lot of, and I'm going to offer this as my opinion. Let me just say that it's an intelligence-based opinion, that a lot of the artifacts in the museums, a lot of the supposed collectibles, the precious statuettes, are counterfeit. They're not, the real ones are not there anymore. But it's a very sad thing, you know, what has happened in Egypt. So I agree. I mean, I was fortunate to be able to, you know, dance on the Great Pyramid when I did, because now there's just no way that you're going to be able to get there. I'm a very, very fortunate man. So yes, I absolutely agree with you that so much of what, you know, was out there in Egypt. But I can also say that there are the caves of Lascaux and some of the others in France and Northern Europe and even in Russia and Siberia. The overwhelming number of figures are female in their essence. Usually when a male was being depicted, he would be shown with a phallus. And if you look at these images very carefully, it's overwhelming. Maybe 8 or 9 out of 10 images, if the phallus is what we, the guiding mark is to male or female, they're overwhelmingly female. Nevertheless, our history, I mean, what I read to you, some of the quotes that I gave you are what we know, but you can see that there appears to be an agenda on describing and assigning value to a woman and her body. But there have also been deliberate efforts by men of power trying to control their empires or trying to take control of empires, putting down played in history. And that's why, to me, it's so important to be able to continue to do this research. But again, I need some women to step forward and help me with the culture. At any rate, my apologies, and please interrupt me, because, I mean, I could go on and on with some of the mistreatment. I mean, I think that's being treatment of women throughout history and the record of womankind throughout history. Well, I'm sorry.
Well, what I was going to do is whenever you're ready to segue into it, is to share some of the newer pieces of information that didn't make it in your book, and tie that in, because you're explaining that it's not what we think it is. And so I think it kind of ties in with, obviously everything ties in with your theme here tonight, but I think it would be pretty appropriate for tonight's show.
Okay, well, thank you. And there's just so much, and I get so caught up with almost any question. But one of the things that I discovered in my research in looking at the stories, and particularly the written record, what written records there are, one of the things I discovered is that linguistic scholars, they have an agenda, but they also have a perspective that just doesn't allow for the way that primitives thought. Let me give you an example. I mean, if you were to take, say, 4 or 5 men, and you were to put them out there in the woods, and they're isolated, waiting for, the ducks or the bears or whatever they're hunting to appear, and they're sitting there at night around the campfire, and what are they going to talk about? Okay, what are men out in the wilderness going to talk about? Well, they'll probably talk about either football or baseball, maybe, I don't know, one of the sports, what they did in the bowling league or something. But invariably, I'm going to argue that they're going to end up talking about women. Maybe not necessarily in a positive way, but they're going to talk about their wives, their girlfriends, the problems that they have with women. They're going to end up talking about women, okay? Now, let's take that same scenario, hunters out in the wilderness waiting for the next day or for the hunt to appear, and let's put them back thousands and thousands of years ago. They're out there in the wilderness, okay? 5,000 BC, let us say. Now, what are they going to talk about? Baseball? Football? Nintendo? What are they going to talk about? I mean, they don't have any of these things. They can't talk about cable. They can't talk about, what are they going to talk about? Invariably, just like men of today, they will talk about women. Now, how are they going to talk about women? Well, my wife, or my partner, or my spouse, whatever they called them at the time, she has these 3 kids, and she's going to take care of them, and she's wonderful, and she takes care of them. I have no problems with her. She doesn't argue with me about how much food I brought back. She doesn't argue about me snoring at night. She doesn't argue with me because I happen to look at Dawana, the cave woman next door. No, invariably men are going to talk, and certainly in some cases in a positive way, but in other ways they're going to talk about women. And most, the linguistics has been pivotal in unlocking some of the lost history. And let me give you an example of what linguistic scholars, the experts, what they have said, all right? What they have done is they get together and they say, okay, well, let's take the languages from Northern Europe, from India, from Africa. Let us see if we can find a common source. Is there an alpha language? And they have constructed what is known as the Proto-Indo-European. And this is the oldest language on the planet. And there are variations, morphs of the Proto-Indo-European. But essentially, original, and from English, Latin, Greek, all of the languages they came from. All right, so here's what they found. One of the first things I talked about, excuse the list, English word tree, the word true, as in false and true, the word truth and trust, and druid. Tree, true, truth, trust, and druid all come from a Proto-Indo-European root, deru, D-E-R-U. Okay? All of these words come from deru. But here's what's interesting, and here's one of my arguments. The word deru is linguistically the same and related to the root uderu, U-D-E-R-O, a womb. A word uderu is the root for uterus. Here's my argument, that early man was so mystified, so involved with the awesomeness of woman, just what woman could do and they couldn't, that they ended up building a long history of philosophy and interpretation of mysteries. Word, tree, and druid is derived from the same root, a cognate, which means womb. In other words, at the foundation of Druidism, true, truth, trust, and tree is the concept of the uterus. I know it's a little difficult to follow without sitting and having the papers in front of you, but what I am saying is the mystery of woman, especially woman, her private parts. They are so mysterious. Men of power, conquerors, warlords from the ancient prehistoric past, they're going, oh my God, look at what woman can do. She can have a baby. She periodically will start bleeding as if she had been stabbed by a sword, and then all of a sudden she heals. A woman, that part of a woman is so magical, so enchanting, that it can attract, it can make the most powerful man weak in his knees. It can attract the weakest man, the most powerful, the richest, the youngest, the oldest, the poor. Is a divine creator. It's in a woman's Druidism. The concept of the magic and the mystery of Druids comes from originally the concept of the magic and power and awesomeness of a woman's private parts. Primitive man, late man, ancient man, and modern man have reduced the mystery of woman to one thing, her sexual parts. And they have missed it. They have missed the point. Union with a woman is not totally physical. That is a small part. Union with a woman is actually union with her spirit, her heart, her soul, her mentality, and yes, her physical aspects. But men in general have missed that. 99.9% of men think, okay, I can have union physically, therefore I'm one with, she's mine, I'm hers, and there it is, and they have missed the 99% of what it means to have union. By the way, the word sex, where does that come from? It's in the first book. I'm sure that you remember. I read it long, long ago in the Proto-Indo-European, which is actually rooted in what I'm going to say is the Proto-Altaic or Proto-Mongolian. There was a word that was used for cut, C-U-T. What is a woman's cut? Well, it's a euphemism for her private parts. Ultimately, if you look in any etymology dictionary, especially the American Heritage Dictionary of Indo-European Roots, you will find that the word sex is derived from the root sec, which means a cut. And they say, well, it's the division between men and women, and this is what separates the two of them. No. Originally, the concept of sex revolved around one thing, a woman's cut. And then ancient men of power, trying to understand the mysteries of woman, they said, well, this sec, this cut, that is what her divinity is. That's where divine magic is. And the word sec, the root sec, which meant cut, means it's the source for the word sacred. Anything that is sacred in its origin, that word meant it revolved around a woman's cut. That is where the concept of men had, that's what's sacred, is a woman's cut, her sec. And it goes on and on and on. What I did in the second book, what I did in the first book, and I said, look, I'm going real quick. the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, the Solomon's Temple, the Freemasons' mysteries, and on, are all based originally on a woman's private parts. Okay. One of the things, and the foundation of the work in the first two books is basically the concept of the SEC, S-E-K, the S-E-K or S-E-C, the cut, okay, a woman's cut. Now, here's a mystery, and this is something that I didn't talk about in August, and I've not talked about anywhere other than at the table with my family and with the elders.
Yeah.
Why is, this is the first, this is for you, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you.
Why is a crescent moon a symbol linked to woman? Why is that a woman's symbol, a crescent moon? I've heard so many explanations. Oh, well, it's the waning, it's the waxing, the rebirth, it's the going away, it's the shedding of the blood. And why is the crescent moon? And then you have the crescent-shaped double axe. Why is the crescent moon a symbol that is linked to womankind? The word crescent is actually rooted in S-E-K or S-E-C, a woman's private parts. But why? Why is that? I want to try to take you through an exercise in your imagination. Imagine if you could see a woman's private parts, and I'm going to add a little qualifier here to make it easier to imagine. Imagine a woman's private parts, then you're looking directly on, but there's no hair, okay? So there's no pubic hair to hide or to take away from what you see. If you were to see directly on, it would appear to be a straight line. Makes sense, right?
Right.
But now suppose you begin to move to the left or to the right. What happens to what appears to be a straight line? As you begin to move to either side, the curvature of her body begins to take that straight line and turn it into a crescent. That's why crescent is rooted in S-E-K, the cut of a woman, her private organs. That is not only makes sense, it's visually absolutely correct. So that concept began thousands and thousands of years ago. It has nothing to do with the waxing and the waning of the moon and all of those other things. It is a very simple visual description. Over time. I'm sorry?
Yeah, and I have to say, as you were explaining that, a couple things that came to mind is some of the statues that in their headpieces are wearing crescent moons. There's crescent moons in their headpieces, their breastplates, their armor, clothing, etc. and so forth. Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Through the deliberate manipulation of men of power, warlords and conquerors, and men who were kings and pharaohs who wanted to take control, they deliberately destroyed some of the records. They actually, in many cases, exterminated some of the women, the shamanesses, who knew what this is about, and even some of the priests who were followers of the ways of the divine feminine. And they destroyed this image to the point where I'm going to argue by the time you were in Egypt, Samaria, Babylon, Mesopotamia, they didn't know what the crescent moon represented. They had no idea. They said, oh, well, it has to be the moon, and oh, it makes sense because it's a symbol of this, it's a symbol of that. It doesn't make any sense, but it was a very simple visual image. Let me add to this. Again, we discussed this in August at our gathering there. If you were to, now, let's go back, and if you can imagine you had a straight-on view, even if a woman were standing up, she's standing in front of you, and she's, completely, what is it, what do they call it? Sunclad? I forget what it's called. Skyclad, okay? Skyclad. And if you were to look at her private parts, what would you see? You would see the pubic hair, which forms a triangle, point down. throughout the visual, the artistic representations, Samaria, Mesopotamia, the oldest cultures, Babylon, even the Middle East and the Orient in Egypt, a triangle was always representative of a woman's private parts. It was a female symbol. That's how they word it. It's a female symbol. Absolutely, absolutely correct. But then here's the problem. If it's a woman's symbol, then they said, well, then we have to have a male symbol. And, oh, wait. Let's turn the triangle upside down. Therefore, it is a male symbol. Absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. A triangle has always been a visual representation of a woman's private parts. It is a female symbol. Now, just as a kernel of thought, we will discuss it more in depth in February. If an upright triangle also represents a female, absolutely, I will argue that point, and a point down triangle represents a female, what would happen if you put one triangle over the other one? One point down, one point up. What symbol, what sign do you then have? It's a sign that was used in the Middle East as the ultimate sign of the divine masculine, of God. And I'm going to argue that is not the case. The argument is you have the divine Father and the divine Son. This is the representation. I'm sorry. It is a symbol of the divine Mother and the divine Daughter. Men have taken, they try so hard in history to make themselves the dominant power, the dominant creature in humankind. And then they try to pass this on to the world around them. You know, here's another one really quick. I'm sorry. But, you know, I hear, and I'm sure you've seen that, Geo, the History Channel, and in all of these Animal Planet and stories where, okay, here's the lion, and he goes in and he's protecting his pride, he's protecting the women, and when he comes in and he takes over, if there are any cubs that have belonged to another male, he destroys them because the male lion wants to make sure that his genetic bloodline survives. The male lion wants his genes to go on. Let me think about this. Do you really think when the lion comes in and takes possession of all the females, do you really think he's thinking about his genetic makeup, his genetic life continuing? $14,500 times larger than the sperm. Okay? 14,500 times larger than the sperm. So let's think about this. When a male sperm and a female egg join together, how big a part does the sperm contribute? 1 part in 14,500. 1 part. Female genes in the human egg, female genes in the contribution to life vary from between 250 to 100, depending on the study that you read, 250 female genes for every 1 male gene that every embryo has. 250 to 1 male gene, 14,500 larger. All embryos begin as a female. That's why.
I love it.
I tell you, people, I mean, that is maybe the hardest thing. Now, I am not saying that all of a sudden all men are sissies or effeminate. That's not the case. The case is that life on this planet began with an X chromosome. It was female-based, whether it came in by accident or there really is intelligent design. So, you know, what has happened is supports that I'm saying for thousands and thousands of years, Venus figurines, and there are all kinds of caves with archaeological, the cave drawings and inscribed walls that they were all female. I'm sorry?
Yeah, and Robert,
Sorry,
before
what?
you go on with the Egypt thing, I want to tell you something that I went to Egypt in 2012 and visited some of the museums in there, right?
So is the plumbing the identifying feature of what constitutes a male? If that's true, then any woman who takes and undergoes surgery and has an operation and now has the plumbing, by definition, then because she has or he has the plumbing, then they're male. What identifies a male? The Y chromosome or the plumbing? And doctors, especially male doctors, are having a lot of problem with this, and that's a question that, hopefully your listeners will entertain. What is it? A Y chromosome, and there are men who don't have it today, or the plumbing, and there are women who do have the plumbing. Okay, now, probably what got me in the most trouble about 2 years ago when I first started coming out, the female egg. The female egg is men have nipples. There is no other reason. They are not erogenous zones. I'm sorry, that's a mistake. Men have nipples because all human embryos began as females. All of a sudden, for whatever reason, there is a testosterone bath, and this embryo, which was destined to become female, is suddenly altered chemically to become a male. Therefore, here's where I got in the most trouble and continue to disturb people. I will argue that every single male on this planet is an altered female. Were it not for testosterone, you would have been a female. All males on this planet, all human males, are altered females.
Robert, you shared that piece of information before on this show.
Exactly.
And I'm going to tell you, it raises some eyebrows out there.
People in the medical field are wondering, here's the question: what constitutes a male? Is it the Y chromosome or is it his plumbing? I'm sorry, in Los Angeles, the Medical Association said that 1 in 20,000 men on this planet have no Y chromosome. In this day and age, 1 in 20,000 men have no Y chromosome. They are X chromosome based. So now, they don't have a Y chromosome. Does that mean they're female? Well, they got the right plumbing.